Good afternoon. My name is Special Agent Jennifer Holland. I am a recruiter with the Air Force Office of Special Investigations. I specifically recruit for civilians to work for our agency. So we're here today to talk about entry-level applicants because the process is a little bit different than folks that are experienced. And just a note before we start, we are recording the session. So if you don't want your picture to be on the recording forever, you can just turn your camera off. And at the end, when we ask questions, you can pop up then, or you can just type your questions in. So I just want to mention that before we get started. Alrighty, so thanks for everyone. We had a really great showing today, so I really appreciate everyone coming. The plan for today, so I have a few slides to go through with just some basic information about OSI, questions everyone asks. We typically have typically answers most of the questions you'll have. So I have just those, that bit of information, and then afterwards we'll do a Q&A. And so the way we'll do that is just as we're going, you can type your questions into the chat, and then I'll just go in order of which I got the questions. So if you see something while I'm talking that's of interest or you have a question, just feel free to throw it in the chat and I'll go through all of them. And I'll be here until I answer all of the questions. Hopefully I'll get to be able to post this session since I am recording it, and it'll be available as well afterwards. So I'll get started. Thanks everybody for being here. So we are a federal law enforcement agency. We do both counterintelligence and criminal investigations. So anything that is a felony level crime or above. As it's related to the Air Force, we're involved in. So as you can see there under our mission sets, we do criminal investigations, large fraud investigations, counterintelligence. We have cyber investigations, expeditionary activities, which is our deployed mission, and then special security services. So we do assist with some of the SAP programs, which are special access, meaning classified programs in the Air Force. So we have a number of our agents assigned to those to do that. If you're interested in a little bit more information, our website is full of data and descriptions. We also have a number of other recorded podcasts and different sessions that you can read a little bit more. We are most similar to the FBI. The only other two agencies that do both counterintelligence and criminal investigation are the FBI and NCIS. So the three of us have that full spectrum of mission in terms of how we do criminal investigations. So overall, we are a worldwide organization. We have about 3,400 personnel. That includes special agents, professional staff, contractors at 260 locations around the world. And you can see just a few of the dots there. It's not all of them. And that's run by 11 regional headquarters. And so as a civilian, you have the opportunity to live and work overseas, which is, I think, one of the great selling points and it's why I came into the organization. We are unique as compared to the FBI and the NCIS in that we are comprised of civilian agents and active duty military members, as well as reservists. And you can see the pie chart there where I break it out to show you specifically how we are structured in our organization. And so if you're coming into OSI, just know ahead of time that you will be working with officer agents, enlisted agents, active duty members. You will not be joining the military, and I can talk about that later in the discussion, but you will be working side by side with a number of military members. So how you can use your degree, and I always like to put this slide in here because it's one of the questions that I do get quite a bit. And you can read through there, I don't have to read it to you, but in OSI, because of our wide spectrum of investigative authorities from counterintelligence to cyber to forensics and criminal investigation, you are able to use your degree in a number of things. So if you're going to school for intelligence studies and you really want to work overseas, foreign policy or anything like that, we have a number of opportunities. So you can work doing counterintelligence investigations. We have joint terrorism task forces that we're a part of with the FBI. We also participate in the force protection detachments. So this is the thing that kind of came out of the USS Cole bombing of 2001, where the military decided that we were going to place people in overseas locations to gather information to give us a better picture of the threat. So same with accounting and business. If you're have a degree in that and you're interested in investigations, that can be very well put to use doing fraud investigations, especially our large contract frauds. So the government acquires quite a bit of military technology. We do that through a number of civilian contractors. And so a lot of times we'll see indications of fraudulent activity, and those things need investigated. So there are a number of things outside of the normal, if you're thinking just criminal justice, law enforcement, that you can do in OSI and use your specific degree. So if you come to OSI, you come in as an entry-level employee. We will train you how to be an agent. We would much rather someone come to us with skills that we can't teach you. So cyber skills, finance skills, forensics, that kind of thing. We can teach you how to be an agent, and we will. We'll send you to special agent training down at the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center. It's 19 weeks down in Glencoe, Georgia. That's South Georgia. They will teach you everything you need to know about being an agent. So if you've never touched a weapon before, they will show you how to take it apart, shoot it day or night. Officer tactics, driving scenarios, you'll drive fast cars, you'll learn how to interview witnesses, you'll learn how to handcuff somebody, you'll learn how to do forensics in the very basic level of forensics. And so you'll come out of school being able to come on as an OSI agent and go into a probationary time. So we can guarantee that you'll get very good training. This is the same training that most federal agencies use. The only people that do not use it are the FBI and DEA, have their own academy. So everyone else goes down here, the Marshals, Secret Service. So you'll be training with the rest of the federal agents. So I'm going to talk about 1811 recruiting and our recruiting program and the two ways that we recruit people. So we do recruit experienced agents at the journeyman GS-13 level. And what that means is that you have experience in investigations. You can work investigations without any supervision. And typically that is about the 4-year, 5-year mark is what we're looking for, people with about that much investigative experience. So we're hiring people at the GS-13 level, and that's a different discussion. We had that one last week. Today, I'm going to talk specifically about entry level. So for you, we do hire 2 ways, and then I'll talk about our intern program. So we have a Palace Acquire program, which is a GL7 entry level. And the Palace Acquire program is actually run by the Air Force. And so the entire Air Force participates in it. Basically, they've said to us, hey, here, you can hire this many people a year, bring them on, teach them how to be an agent. And it's an entry-level program across the Air Force. So we participate in that program. Every year we get between 12 and 15 positions, and we'll hire Palace Acquire. Now we're looking for people who are just out of college, recently graduated, that are going to come in at that GL7 level. The other time we hire entry level, we call it our developmental program. And that's when OSI internally will look around and say, hey, we've got a lot of empty positions. We can't always hire at the GS-13. You know what? These positions would be appropriate for someone coming on an entry level. And so we'll count the positions and then we'll hire for that many. We just did an announcement like this in August. So we are hiring a big group of developmentals right now. And they usually can come on between a GL7 and a GL12. And that's just based on their education and experience level. So if you've got a little bit of investigative experience at a state or local level, and you've got your degree and master's, that can kind of influence how we're going to bring you in at what step. But that's really determined through the process, and I couldn't tell you as you're applying. So the other way to come in, which is, I think, a hidden gem, is our Premier College Intern Program. We call it the PSIT program. And you can come on with OSI as a GL5, and it's a 10-week program in the summer. You apply in the fall before that summer. So we just advertised in September, October for those interns, and then they're going to start at the end of this school year. But at the end of that 10 weeks, you can then non-competitively compete for one of the PALS Acquire program positions. So it's kind of a great deal. You don't have to recompete or put in again. And if everyone likes you, you can then go right into a PAC position. So that Premier College Intern Program is really a great deal. And it gives you a chance to test out law enforcement if you're not real sure if that's the career for you before kind of putting in your applications. Because law enforcement is a unique career field, and you want to make sure it's the right place for you. So I'm going to talk quickly about the hiring process. And this, I just like to talk through it so you know why it takes so long. And I'll talk about the timeline in a minute. But typically it takes about 9 months to hire somebody for OSI. And the reason it takes that long is because first, as you can see there, we ID the need to hire. So like I said, we look around, how many billets do we have open? What time is it? What part of the year is it that we're going to hire? The PACs are usually in the fall, developmentals are usually another time of year. So we'll ID that. We'll post the announcement in USA Jobs. So if you don't have a USA Jobs account yet, go ahead and sign up for that. We will do everything through USA Jobs, and you'll submit your application through USA Jobs. Then we'll do an initial screening. So our HR staff will do kind of an initial scrub to make sure you're qualified, right? You're either graduated from school or close enough to graduation where we can consider you. There aren't any other factors that you haven't left off any documents, kind of an initial, just make sure you have the basic qualifications. And those qualifications will be listed in the announcement. So you can kind of read through those when it comes out and make sure you're qualified before you apply. So then we'll do an application review. And really this is a resume review. We'll get all of the resumes that have come in for that application or that vacancy announcement. And then we'll sit down with typically 3 agents who will look through all of the resumes and give them a score based on what they think would make a good agent, how well your resume reads, a couple different factors that we have. We're looking for leadership skills, kind of well-roundedness, doing well in education. And I have another slide about this I can talk about in a minute. If you make it past that stage, we will ask you back for an interview. So you'll come do an interview with us. We do them all over, we do them virtually. So typically over Zoom, we'll do an interview. At the same time, we'll ask you to do some psychological testing with our docs. And that's really just to assess, it's not typically an intelligence test, it's more of a how you handle stress. So cognitive psychological testing. So then once we've finished all that, we'll give you a resume, or we'll put your resume score together with your interview score and your psychological testing, and then we'll create a list and we'll validate through that through some of our senior leaders. If you've made it past that part, you'll get a notice that says, congrats, you are in our final pool. And typically the pool will be a little bit larger than the number of people that we're going to hire because we need alternates for different reasons. People have to drop out for medical reasons, they'll not do well in their background investigation, or they'll just have another job opportunity. And you've been applying to lots of different places. So we'll have a pool of people. We'll contact you. We'll get you started on your medical exam, drug testing, and then we'll talk to you about location. So typically when you apply, it'll say worldwide, or it'll have a list of locations that are going to be open. We don't have you say up front specifically, this is the only location I'll go. We wait and kind of till the end, and we'll come to you and say, what is your preference? And we'll give you a list of all the openings. You'll give us your 1 through N preference of where you'd like to go. And we will try and match you with a place that you want to go to. And the way we do it is it's based on your score. So if you've done really well in the resume and the interview portion, that score will be high and will typically match the top scores with their number 1 preference. If you're lower in the score, you get whatever is left at that time. So once you've said yes, that you tentatively accept the location that we've proposed to you, then we'll start your background investigation. So this is different from a clearance, if you've heard of that. Basically, it is a background investigation to see if you're suitable to be an agent. So they're looking for things that could preclude you from being in law enforcement. So obviously, any felony level criminal activity, any financial issues, any overseas foreign ties that could be a problem later, anything that could be a problem if you're on the stand having to testify in a case. So an agent is looking to see if you would be a good fit. They'll reach out to you. Typically, it's an agent that lives close to you at an OSI detachment near you. They'll reach out, talk to you, your neighbors, your friends, your coworkers to try and paint that picture. So once we get the thumbs up from that local OSI office, then we'll start your onboarding paperwork and we'll get you onboarded. So the timeline for that, like I said earlier, is about 9 months. Typically, we'll have our PACs and PSIPs start between June and August. And we try to line it up so it's right when you graduate. You can apply in the fall, and then you can come on with us as soon as you're done with school. And that's why we start all the way in the fall, because it does take that 9 months. Developmentals, if we've identified you in that developmental pool, it'll be about 9 to 12 months from that application date. The reason why that one is a little bit longer is sometimes in our developmental pool, we will get people who are have prior military experience or may not fit the age for that developmental pool. And so just as a note, federal law does say that you have to be under the age of 37 to apply to be a federal law enforcement officer. And so we do check that. The only chance that you have of getting a waiver to that is if you have veterans status. So if you have veteran status, you can go ahead and help us anyway, fill out the forms. We'll submit on your behalf a waiver for your age, and you can come on if you're over the age of 37. Sometimes if you're currently working for OSI or the government, there's a thing called the 180-day waiver. And that just means if you're coming on as a GS-13, typically it doesn't apply to our PACs and developmentals, but if you're coming on as a GS-13, there are some policies in place that you cannot go from a position in that agency to another position, senior position, and a GS-13 is considered senior. So typically it won't affect our PACs or PSIPs. And then availability to start. So sometimes people are active duty and maybe they're not getting out of the military to a certain date. So sometimes that affects our timeline for those folks. And for the folks answering your putting questions in the chat, thank you. My plan is to get through the slides and then I'm just going to go through everyone's questions at the end. So don't worry, I'll get to everyone's questions. So one of the other things that typically I get asked is what types of candidates are you looking for? And I kind of threw together a couple of things, and these are good for everyone to just see. But a couple of things that I really want to point out are cyber skilled. So cyber skilled, you do not have to have cyber training, formal cyber training, but just as a point of interest, everything we do now is digital and it's online and we're doing everything. So all the evidence that we're collecting in all of our cases are also online. So just a basic understanding of where to find information and evidence and basics of, you don't have to rewire a hard drive and you don't have to, reprogram anything, but just savvy on the computer. And typically this is not a problem for our younger folks. It only kind of sometimes people ask, what can I do to make me a little bit more competitive? This is the thing. Go and look for cyber certificates, because this will definitely help you. We're worldwide, so we're looking for languages, people that have been overseas, creative, inquisitive, analytical. So the thing about criminal investigations is that you just really never know where the information is going to take you. And so we need somebody that can think outside the box, can think through the next step. So if someone gives you information, you can say, okay, you know what, where can I find more information about that? Here, here, here. There's never going to be a checklist. I mean, we have lots of checklists because we're in the military, but it's never going to be the same. It's going to be different for every single case, which is kind of a cool thing and what I really enjoy about investigations. But you have to be flexible. You have to be willing to go overseas. We have lots of positions overseas, and we need people willing to go. Socially adept. This is the other one I like to point out. So you have to be able to talk to people. You have to be, even if you are not an outgoing or extrovert, be willing to do it for the job. And I myself am not. I'm more introverted. But we have learned that the more you can relate to people, the more you can understand kind of where they're coming from and talk to them and build that relationship, the more information you can get from people. And it will be helpful to you in your career. So we are looking for people who have that ability. The other thing I do want to point out on this slide, it often comes up, is clear medical and mental health history. So I always get this question. People will say, if I am on medication for mental health, depression, does that completely eliminate you? The answer is no. So we encourage that. In OSI, we actually have a number of docs on staff. Law enforcement is a tough career field. So we encourage people to talk about any issues they might have. But what will happen is, in your background investigation, if you have any medications that you're on, that agent will go through it with you. And it feels like it's under control and it's something that's stable and completely manageable, then you're fine. If it's unmanageable and you're going on different kinds of medications and having times when you just can't really control what's going on, then that will be assessed as whether you're a good fit for an agent, because law enforcement is tough, and I'll talk about that in a minute. There's some heavy topics, and you're going to be dealing with very difficult things, and so we want to make sure that we're not putting you at risk either by bringing you into a career field that might be difficult. So I like to point that one out. And then lastly, you do have to be able to carry a weapon. So there's a thing called the Lautenberg Amendment. So if you've been convicted of domestic violence, you cannot carry a weapon as a law enforcement officer. So I think that does surprise people sometimes, but you do, and you will be carrying a weapon as a law enforcement typically every day. Okay, so some of the other just frequently asked questions. So am I joining the military? No. So you are joining as a civilian special agent. You will be an Air Force civilian in the civilian system. You will not be in the military. So 30% of our positions in OSI are civilian. The rest are military positions. So you will be working side by side with military agents, but you won't be in the military. The workday, this is the next big question I get. So it's just like, well, I'm gonna say it's the opposite of TV. So basically 10 to 20% of it is really cool. You're conducting search warrants, you're interviewing people, you're following leads, you're doing really awesome things, surveillance. The other 80 to 90% that they don't show on TV is documenting. So you have to document everything, which is cool. But that's every federal agency, so that won't be any different if you go to another agency. It's just the uncool part of the job. So you will spend a lot of time documenting what you do, but it's worth it, and that ensures it's able to go to court and stand up in court. So typically the hours a day are an 8 to 10 hour day, and then there is on-call status. And what I like to tell people is if you're looking for a job where you're going to be able to start at 8 and end at 5 and make it to basketball practice, you know, or your basketball team, this is not the job. Because what happens in law enforcement is you are working a case, you get new information, the case keeps going. You know, someone might come into your office at 4:30 with some information, or you might be interviewing somebody and they say, I know who did it, here's the information. And that leads you somewhere else. So you have to be flexible and willing to be able to work those kinds of hours. And then law enforcement is not 9 to 5. Crime doesn't always happen on the weekdays. It always happens on the weekends. So the number of times many agents will tell you that they're called in on a Saturday or Sunday, it's quite often. So I don't say that to scare you. I just say that so that you know that it's going to happen. And so once you've made peace with it, you know what you're getting into. So do you deploy? Civilians in OSI do not have to mandatorily deploy like military members. If you want to, there is an option. So if that really interests you and you're like, I would love to deploy to a location where military operations are going on, you can raise your hand. Volunteer. Typically for civilians, it's 3 to 6 months. We give you all the training that you need. There's deployment training that we'll give you. So you'll be able to operate in that environment, but it's not mandatory. The other one is, do you get tased? No. So typically tasers are carried by state and local law enforcement. We do not, but we do carry pepper spray at times. So you will experience that at FLETC. So they'll spray you just so you've experienced it. And it's not the first time it's ever happened if somehow you get into a situation where pepper spray goes off. So you will not get tased. And then will I have to move? The other big question. So the simple answer is yes. All of our civilian agents do sign mobility agreements, is what we call them. So that just means that you will be required to move a few times in your career. And the reason for that is that OSI is worldwide. So we have agents that go overseas and come back. And so we need to have a little bit of movement to make room for the people that go overseas. And if you decide to go overseas, so like, let's say you go to your first position and you're working in San Antonio, Texas, and you've been there for about 4 years. And we strive for 4 to 5 years of stable, a stable location for you. And you're like, you know what? I just saw a really cool assignment. They're sending people to Germany. I would love to live in Germany. And you raise your hand, you go for a couple of years, and you come back, and we want a place to put you. So typically you'll move a few times in your career. And that's just for development, to create a little bit of movement, and to prepare you if you want to be promoted later on. You have those experience under your belt. Wow, some of the biggest challenges. So I would say the long hours. That is my number one thing. So that's a very old picture of me. 20 years ago, I was first stationed at Yokota Air Base, Japan. And that picture, I can guarantee you, was a Saturday night at probably 10 o'clock at night. We were at a Japanese festival, meeting with some of our Japanese Air Force colleagues, and it was work. It was fun, but it was work, and we were exchanging information. But a lot of times, the long hours will impact you. So sometimes a lot of people, the way they manage it is, that going in your first couple of years. And then as you move on in your career, you can select assignments that might have a more stable schedule. So a lot of agents will go into other specialties that we have. So if you're interested in fraud, that schedule is a little bit more stable. I would say criminal investigations specifically is a little bit more unstable. And we have other areas that you can go into. Specifically, we have people that specialize in polygraph, forensics, digital forensics, cyber. We have a few different things that you can kind of move into and try and adjust your schedule. So as you get married and have a family, you kind of manage that within your own career. But as long as you know what's coming, you can kind of expect that. The paperwork computer rule, which I already talked about, so that I would say is a pretty big challenge. It's frustrating a lot for people to come in because you get a little bit hooked on the TV version of law enforcement, but it's worth it in the end. But there is quite a bit of paperwork. Realities of the profession. So this is something I really like to hit on. If you are not prepared for it, it's going to surprise you. So law enforcement, like I talked about, the movie version and the TV version of law enforcement, you are dealing with people on the very worst day of their life. So someone has been murdered, someone died accidentally, their child was abused, someone was raped. You will be dealing with people and talking to them about their situation on an everyday basis. And when you talk to someone face to face, it has an impact on you. You feel for them, you understand what they're going through, or empathize what they're going through with what they're going through. And so it can be really heavy of a topic. And so I would say that just be ready for that. And a lot of people talk about this, about why they leave law enforcement. And it'll be okay in the end, you know, as long as you kind of understand that all law enforcement officers have to deal with that, and you know it's coming. So it does catch some people by surprise, but just be ready for that. The other thing is additional duties besides operations and investigations. So OSI is small. We're not as big as the FBI. So sometimes you have to count the weapons in the armory, or you have to do an inventory of the evidence, or kind of all the small things that go along with an office, paperwork and that kind of thing. So we do have people who are a little bit surprised by that. And then the last thing, the initial learning curve. So I would say specifically that this is my example. So if you know how college goes, right? You start off your freshman year and everything takes you 10 times as long because you're not used to studying the long hours, you're not used to classes. But then your senior year, you get to senior year and then you're a pro, right? You have a 10-page paper, it's due tomorrow, you're like, give me 3 hours and I'll get it done. That is exactly how it will be with law enforcement. When you first start, your first probationary year is frustrating because you're learning. You have to look up everything. How do I do a lineup? And how do I do surveillance? And how can I ask these questions in a better way? You're consulting people all the time. And after the probationary time, it gets easier and easier. So I just like to talk about this. It's nothing that's going to change, but it is something that frustrates people. And so if you can get through that first little bit, it does get easier as you move on in the organization. And then why choose OSI? So this is kind of my last slide before the Q&A part. So, I mean, outstanding mission. The reason I love it, putting people behind bars, you really feel at the end of the day that you're making a difference in somebody else's life. A child is hurt and you're, changing things so they are protected now and they're not in that situation anymore. Someone's died and you resolved, maybe it was mysterious death and you've resolved that for them. So I think that brings you're validated for all the hard work you put into it. And you're able to do that. We also have a number of special opportunities, like I said earlier, where you can specialize. So you can do just the criminal law enforcement, criminal investigations, or work in counterintelligence investigations, which is terrorism, espionage, that kind of thing. But you can also specialize in those areas. and go for additional training. So we'll send you to become a forensics expert. If you like cyber investigations, we can send you to hacking school. If you like to do fraud investigations, we send you to finance. You can get your certified fraud examiner certificate. Counterintelligence, there's counter espionage school. So there's lots of great opportunities. If you come into OSI and you kind of don't love what you're doing, there's so many different areas. I myself have moved around from counterintelligence to criminal investigations to insider threat. And so I think that there's lots of opportunity. There's lots of upward mobility. So you can move all the way up to, we have an SES1 who is a part of our senior leadership, and it's easy to promote within OSI. So there's lots of opportunities to travel and work abroad. Also, one of the reasons I came in, I went to Japan as my first assignment. I've also been to England and Qatar and Germany, all over. Lastly, just compensation. You're on the GS scale, and you also receive LEAP pay, which is law enforcement availability pay. So if you're hired as a GS employee, you can look on the OPM charts and see the law enforcement availability pay. It's about 25% of your pay you get on top of your pay, and that's just for being available in those off hours that I talked about. You do have insurance options, family support, because we are small with the military. There's medical options and retirement. So OSI is a fantastic choice. That brings me to the end of my. So if you want some more information, you can go to our website. It's called Recruiting Toolbox, but basically there's podcasts and Q&A, recorded information sessions in there, plus our social media. You can read a little bit more. I'm on LinkedIn, so if you're interested in talking more offline, you can always send me a note on LinkedIn. So that ends my prepared comments. Hopefully I've answered a lot of the questions that you have. I am going to go ahead and move to the Q&A section of this. So my plan is just, if you feel like you've gotten everything that you need, feel free to drop off